Hello everyone, welcome to the Business Talk podcast. I'm your host Deepak, and today we have the privilege of hosting Professor Rohit Prasad, a distinguished professor in the areas of economics and public policy at MDI Gurgaon. Professor Rohit Prasad is also the area chairperson for the economics and public policy at MDI Gurgaon. In this episode, we explore the profound insights and complexities of our changing world through the lens of his remarkable book, The Last Dance of Rationality, Making Sense of an Unraveling World Order. Let's give a very warm welcome to Professor Rohit Prasad, an esteemed faculty member from MDA Gurgaon, joining us on today's podcast. Professor Rohit, a very warm welcome to this podcast episode. It's an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you, Deepak. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast.
Uh, Professor, what inspired you to write The Last Dance of Rationality, and what themes are central to the book?
Uh, Deepak, the journey of the book started with a single word, entanglement. This is a word which comes from physics, and it means it is a phenomenon of two subatomic particles at great distances which start rotating in opposite directions at the same time. I thought of this word when I saw the rise of Donald Trump in US politics. I had stayed in the USA for 8 years, and in those years, Donald Trump used to be a person that kind of a buffoon, but never someone who could run for president. And when he ran for president, I saw how upset that made the elites in the US. And I began to explore that phenomenon as an expression of entanglement of elites in a web of their own making. And that's how the whole book started. And the main theme of the book really is an exploration of how a system which has worked so well for the elites over the last 50 to 60 years has now become a source of great torment and trauma for them. And that is what this book explores.
Yeah, can you elaborate on what you mean by an unraveling world order? What are the key factors contributing to this shift?
Yeah, Deepak, it's quite easy. If you look around, you dazzle in the field of technology, AI, or the mobile revolution, or digital printing, 3D printing. There are tremendous achievements of this civilization, and yet we see that there are also tremendous turbulence. There is tremendous turbulence in our world today. Turbulence in the area which spreads across areas. For example, turbulence in politics. The nature of democracies around the world is changing. The world's greatest democracy, the US itself, is facing a lot of internal conflict. There are turbulences in the area of geopolitics, as the United States, which was the sole sole superpower in the world since the fall of the Soviet Union, is facing challenges in the Middle East and in Europe. Your socio-economic situation is changing because despite all our material loneliness and mental health problems, the economic scenario is changing because a phase of growth which was powered by the growth of debt is coming to an end, and we are seeing the emergence of debt crises everywhere. So this is the multi-dimensional unraveling across politics, geopolitics, society, and economics, all powered by technology, that I refer to as the unraveling of the world order.
How does your background in economics and public policy inform your perspective on global events, discussed in the book, sir?
Well, I do come. I came to this book and to these topics uh, with the perspective of an economist, and so the a large part, or at least 20 to 30% of this book really is of realities of our world. But I have also brought many other perspectives to bear from political science, from sociology, from history, because I have had a parallel career as a popular writer ever since I published my book Startup Sutra in 2013. After that, I published a book called Blood Red River. Startup Sutra, as is evident, was about startups. Blood Red River was about development conflicts in central India. So I have gradually cultivated other perspectives, and I brought those perspectives along with my hat as an economist to this book.
Very nice. In your view, how does rationality play a role in decision making at both individual and institutional level during the times of crisis?
That's a great question. And I think one question that your audience would enjoy being this being a business talk. Age of reality which we live in, which is the age which started with the Renaissance in the 1500s, has really emphasized the role of rationality in individual decision making as well as in organizational decision making. Rationality, as defined by the laws of logic, of probability, of statistics, of game theory, and so on. Uh, and certainly this is an important aspect of the way human beings behave. But human beings are also fundamentally emotional creatures. And the perspective of rationality has ignored this aspect of human behavior and human decision making. So human beings are not really rational animals, as economics would have us believe. We can hope that they will someday become reasonable human beings, or a reasonable hope, or want them to become rational decision makers.
What are some of the most surprising insights you have uncovered in your research from this book?
The surprising insight really relates to the fact that we think that power structures in the world are very stable and stationary, right? And that it is difficult for new power structures to emerge. But the amazing insight that I got from this book was how new power structures emerge right from under the nose of old power structures, and often with the uh, unknowing cooperation of those existing power structures themselves. And the greatest example of this is the rise of China. For 300 years of colonial history, we saw that broad-based economic progress powered by science and technology was actually a lie, because the progress was always restricted to the colonial powers, and it was at the expense of the colonies, right? However, what we have seen in the last 50 years is the rise of one of these peripheral economies, China, powered by their own internal strengths, but also by the interests and the cooperation of the colonial power, or the imperial power, that is USA, right? To a point where China is now a peer competitor to the United States. And so this was really the process by which this happened, the kinds of mechanisms which allowed this to happen. The in how this actually, the US thought that this would be to their own benefit when it turned out to be otherwise. This was really interesting for me. And the remarkable history is so much a case of unexpected consequences, unintended consequences. It's a, when things go out of the control of people who think that they are controlling the trajectory of history.
Professor, how can policymakers better navigate the complexities of our changing world, as outlined in your work?
Deepak, this is really a matter, this is really a time in our history where we have to cultivate big picture perspectives. We have to understand what is happening, the disruptions that are going on, and simultaneously the new world that is coming into being. And therefore, whether you are a policymaker or whether you're a business leader, you have to appreciate what is going on right now. At one level, what is happening is that a unipolar world, which existed since the fall of the Soviet Union, is now breaking up into multipolar form at one level. And a new world, in this new multipolar world, we are going to see new powers like China and India come to the fore. At one level, that's what's happening. But at a deeper level, there is a much wider change which is happening, because this new world is going to be powered by Asian perspectives, which are fundamentally different from the Western perspectives. So in a sense, what is really happening is the decline of Western civilization and the rise of an Asian vision of life. And policymakers and leaders have to be aware of this so that they can not just understand what is going on, but shape what is going on and gain from what is going on.
So what implications do you believe your findings have for the future of international relations and cooperation?
The findings really are pointing to a world which much more than it has in the past. The interesting thing is that we are in a world which is very deeply interconnected. The last 30 years of globalization have created a very interconnected world. We are joined at the hip, so to speak. So the rivalry between the US and China will take place in the context of their deep interdependence. For example, China holds about $3 trillion of in the form of US Treasury securities, right? So it is one of the biggest lenders of money to the United States. And the United States economy depends on this money flowing from China to the United States. But so does China, because this actually allows China to keep its currency weak and remain competitive in world export markets. Transition, which is such a vital part of our future. China is a superpower in this area of energy transition because they have access to the rare earth metals. In terms of reserves, they have about 60% of the reserves of rare earth metals. In terms of processing capacity, they have 90% of the processing capacity of the world. About 80% of the solar panels of the world are manufactured in China. So, and the markets for all these things are outside China. So there are deep interconnections. And what this means is that it is unlikely that we are going to see a world war of the kind that we saw earlier. What we are going to see is a space of technology competition in which these superpowers like the USA and China are going to compete in the area of AI for world domination, right? we are also going to see our targets on energy transition, I think, becoming more compromised and difficult to achieve. To become more energy transition.
Uh, are there any historical examples you reference that highlight the theme of rationality and decision making in the context of global order?
There are lots. Rationality, for example, I've already spoken about how the US believed that it was helping China to grow in the US's own interest. This is an example of the operation of rationality. I'm struggling to think of a different example where the approach of rationality was used. Okay, let me take the example of this field called the gain of function research, which was being carried out in the Wuhan lab and which may have led to a leak of the coronavirus from that lab, which is not established, but it is a possibility. Again, this really reflects this ideology that the panacea for all evils is science, the progress of science, and that must not be how risk that process of scientific development may be. Right? This is another great example of the ideology of rationality, which then, in a sense, boomeranged on the whole world and brought about the coronavirus crisis. If we look at the war in Afghanistan or the attempt of the United States to seed or foment what were called the color revolutions in Eastern Europe. Right? This is again an example of the operation of the ideology of rationality, which believes that Western liberal democracy is something that must be diffused across the whole world using the military power and influence of the United States. Right? And this again, as we saw in the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, as well as the war in Ukraine, has really come back to bite the West.
How can readers apply the concepts from your book to understanding of current global events?
Well, they have to read the book and understand, as I said, the broad changes that are taking place in the world, right? Which are going to have very practical implications on their day-to-day lives. For example, as I said, I don't think that our goals on energy transition are going to be met in a divided world order. And so we are going to start seeing a lot more impacts of climate change in terms of global warming or natural disasters or immigration of people from areas affected by agricultural areas affected by climate change. We are also, I think, to see a lot on a practical level, we are going to see a lot of urban environmental movements. Whereas people realize that the era of rationality has led to an ecological crisis, which is ruining the quality of life of urban areas, even though equipped with the latest material development. Air pollution is such a curse to people living in the most advanced urban agglomerations of the world. And here, I really envy you, Deepak, for living in a town with a river flowing through it. Right? That's the lifestyle. So we're going to see a lot of people try and opt for the kind of lifestyle that you have opted for, given the kinds of changes that are happening and the kinds of awareness and realization that will emerge.
Yeah. Lastly, Professor, would you like to give some, takeaways to our participants?
Well, I don't want to say buy the book, but that's what I would like them to do. But no, I'm just joking. The takeaway that I would like to leave participants with is that we are going to time, because as the era of rationality is in decline, the fact will lose its preeminent position as the top human faculty. And it will be joined by other human faculties, and some which take us back to the Dark Ages. For example, we will see people talking more about the role that intuition should play in human affairs. But at the same time, intuition can very easily be mixed up with superstition, right? We are going to see people talking more about moving away from the philosophy of individualism and talk more about the interconnectedness of human beings. But as we move towards collectivism, we could see a return of oppression along the lines of gender or religion or caste or sexuality, right? As we see human beings move away from a very narrow definition of success based on material progress, we could see people move towards the pursuit of happiness. But at the same time, given all the material availabilities, to a hedonic pursuit of self-gratification, right? And lastly, we could move into an era of inclusive growth as technology empowers the vast mass of people, but this could also become a totalitarian utopia, because this new technology makes it possible for a very small number of people to acquire immense power, even though the vast mass of people have access to many more material goods and services than ever before, right? So the takeaway for the readers really is that you have to navigate this very complex terrain which lies ahead. It's a very exciting terrain because new possibilities, new human possibilities are being born. But at the same time, you have to guard against a reversion into the old darknesses, right? So it's a very exciting time. Equip yourself to navigate these waters and chart your own course. Don't let side what's the right thing for you.
Thank you very much, Professor Rohit Prasad. It's a very insightful conversation on this podcast channel, and we would be, very happy to see your book, and also, our readers will also buy it and read it. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deepak. It has been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, sir. Goodbye.
Bye.